Gravity Falls has been on my For You page a lot more recently.
Nothing brightens a dark room like light from a window. Time to open the window. Oh no! Why? Why is this happening?
So it inspired me to rewatch the show. I haven't actually rewatched it since middle school, and I wanted to see if it still held up. And it did! But it's never actually that simple with writers. I wanted to figure out why it worked. I gotta use that English degree for something. For a show that's fairly episodic, it has some very strong through lines. The characterization is great and memorable, the mysteries are engaging, and the ending was still as beautifully bittersweet as it was when I first watched it almost 10 years ago. But the thing that stood out the most on a second watch through was how well this show foreshadows. It does a lot of clever things that lead to a very consistent, well thought out story that rewards both careful first time viewers and multiple watch throughs. And that's the most obvious with how the show foreshadows the reveal of Ford. For a character that only appears in about 10 episodes, Ford casts a long shadow over the story. And it's not just because he's the author of the journals. The specific detail that he's Stan's twin brother looms large over the story like a horrifying Stan balloon. Obviously, there's Stan being suspicious from episode 1, the existence of the journals and the question of the author, and Stan having the first journal, but while these obviously hint towards Ford, all these macro details mainly show on a first watch through is that Stan has a secret, not specifically that this secret is a twin brother. Alex Hirsch could have left it at that, but there are so many more details that specifically point towards Ford's existence. We've got the Stan War in the Stanley Mobile in episode 2, Stan's reaction to his wax figurine, Stan knowing Gideon's a fraud, the different looking Stan in episode 9, the broken swing in Stan's mind, Ford literally being in Stan's memory, Stan's handwriting not matching the one on the deed, Bill's reaction to Gideon's request, the secret room in the shack and Stan's behavior around the glasses, and Stan's tattoo. All of these details make the reveal seem so obvious in hindsight, but there's a very cool detail that I wish more writers used to hide details in plain sight. Plausible deniability.
You call that Ben Franklin? He looks like a woman! Uh-oh.
Good foreshadowing involves leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. You don't want to be walking in the wood and suddenly find a loaf of bread, or be following breadcrumbs only to find a leak at the end of the trail. And you also don't want to just throw half a loaf in front of the audience. There's a careful balance between leaving meaningful puzzle pieces that point towards the answer and give the audience a chance to predict the twist without revealing too much too quickly. So how does this idea of plausible deniability work? This foreshadowing technique relies heavily on characterization. Stan knowing that Gideon's a fraud could be because he calls him by his twin brother's name, or it could be that Stan's jealous of Gideon's success, or it's just a fraud recognizing another fraud. Stan getting emotionally attached to a wax figurine could be a sign that he has a missing twin, or it could be another eccentricity from an egotistical, weird old man. Stan being cagey about his tattoo could be because there's some tragic origin to it, or it could be that he lived a wild life in his past, or he could just be annoyed that his nosy nephew keeps trying to film him with his shirt off. Fair, honestly. Yes, the twin brother answer is true, and there's enough evidence in the first season and a half of the show for viewers to come to that conclusion. But the other answers seem equally plausible. And at first, the other answers are way more reasonable. It's an easier jump for the audience to think, well, that's just Stan being Stan, than for them to assign a deeper meaning to it. This is a technique I haven't seen too many other stories use. Most of the time, we don't think of characterization as a way to foreshadow information. So rather than having characters speak in vague terms, this kind of foreshadowing involves the characters staying completely in character, not necessarily acting mysteriously or cryptically, they're just behaving how they normally would. Because, let's be honest, cryptic statements are almost always just for the benefit of the audience. No one talks like that. Because when you have characters suddenly acting almost seriously, it's like putting up a neon sign that says, hey, there's a mystery here. Sometimes that's needed. That's why we see Stan going into the basement to the secret room in the vending machine at the end of episode 1. But if you want to be subtler or wait to highlight a mystery or a certain aspect of the mystery, this is a good technique because viewers won't think to question certain oddities because that's just Stan being Stan. This has two benefits. One, it increases the rewatch value by not making certain scenes seem dumb on a second viewing. And two, it does a better job at hiding the mystery than those vague conversations ever could. Another example of this idea is from Dimension 20's Fantasy High. Spoiler alert for Fantasy High Season 3 until here. In Season 2, reformed jock bully recounts the events of the Season 1 finale by saying,
and Porter did some, barbarian healing stuff with me.
Barbarian healing stuff is a really vague sentiment that should prompt some follow-up questions. Also, what on earth is barbarian healing? Again, that should prompt some follow-up questions. But this fits with the way that Rog speaks, and I love the guy, but this is his intelligence score. So it would make sense that this was just him making a mistake, or, being more fair to him, being confused and overwhelmed after a traumatic evening. This foreshadowed the big twist of Season 3, and beautifully hid the twist from seasoned D&D players, including one who had been suspicious of the villain since Season 1. Making your audience underestimate your characters is a really cool technique for things like this, because if you notice from both Gravity Falls and Fantasy High, Stan and Rog are both comedic characters. The things they say are often played for laughs, or otherwise not taken super seriously. So by not altering their behavior, it's so easy to slip in important bits in foreshadowing through them. So far, I've been talking about things about Stan's character that helped obscure the twist, but what about what happens post-twist? How does this idea of foreshadowing through characterization help the story after the big reveal happens?
I think he actually wants to fish with us.
Hey, I know what'll cheer you sad sacks up. Pow! Pine's family fishing hats. That's hand stitching, you know.
The plot twist doesn't invalidate Stan's core values, it emphasizes them. From episode 2, the audience can see that Stan, despite his criminal tendencies, really does care about his family, and he wants a relationship with them. This idea is repeated throughout the series, which makes it clear that even though Stan is frequently selfish, irreverent, and reckless, he cares about his family above all else. So when it's revealed that Stan committed many crimes and almost ended the world to save his brother, it makes a lot of sense. Because the plot twist aligns with his character values, it reveals a level of depth and lets it feel like we're getting to know this character better, rather than him feeling like a stranger for the sake of the plot. It's not that he wasn't who he said he was. There is just way more under the surface that we can now appreciate more. If a twisted story is more interesting untwisted, then that's a bad plot twist. But this is kind of the opposite. The story and Stan's character gain a new level of depth because of this twist. And it's not because it comes out of nowhere, it's because the audience can clearly see where this all came from. But this twist isn't just good because of the techniques that are used, they're good because of how they're implemented, and a lot of that has to do with pacing.
Experiment 78? Uncle Stan, what is this place?
I don't know. Just another room I gotta clean up now.
I mentioned the idea of breadcrumbs earlier, and how it's important not to just drop a whole loaf of bread in the middle of the forest. To truly foreshadow well, you need to start small to not tip off the audience too early, but you can't stay small. You start off with crumbs, then work your way up to leaving around whole slices, and then you build up to the whole loaf. This works really well because you can teach your audience important things without them realizing it, and you avoid overwhelming them while still slowly pointing them in the right direction. You can see this crumb to slice pipeline in the show. The stand of war in episode 2 is a super small detail that the audience could not understand the significance of until the reveal. It's a tiny breadcrumb. But then there's a different stand in episode 9 and the handwriting on the deed. Those are slightly bigger hints. And then, the most damning on the list above, in my opinion, is Sam's reaction to the glasses in the secret room. This is such strange behavior for him, and it's focused on 2 separate times, and it really points the audience towards the truth. But that happens at the end of season 1, and only a few episodes later, the audience learns that Stan had the first journal all this time. By slowly dropping larger and larger hints, the plot twist feels like a really natural part of the story rather than coming out of nowhere. All of these foreshadowing techniques led to a really successful and satisfying setup and payoff for the show.
Is this the part where one of us faints?
Oh, I am so on it, dude.
Bad foreshadowing makes everything you've watched so far seem stupid and can make a second watch through painful. Good foreshadowing makes second watch throughs more rewarding and gives the audience a chance to experience the story in a whole new way. And that's one of the reasons why this rewatch was so fun. I could pick up on the things that pointed towards the twist, and it just showed how much thought and care was put into this show. And why, despite how much we'd all love a third season, it really is best that it ended where it did. The arc was complete there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you want to see more media analysis and writing lessons, hit that subscribe button. And is there anything I missed about what makes this reveal so good? Meet me in the comments to discuss.